All right, and we are live. You know what? I've got to calculate how many episodes I've done, and I open up every single one of them the same, but never quite with this kind of a guest. My guest today, Mr. Jeremy Foster, SVP of Cisco Compute.
I feel like I'm in
Probably
trouble already. I don't even know where you're going to go with this now, Sabrina.
Good. So obviously we're off to a great start. I don't see the problem. Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. But yeah, I mean, I don't think the people who know you absolutely love you. The people on the outside who know of you, I don't think they really understand how awesome of a person you are. And so I'm hoping we just get into that today. There's also some leadership stuff that I need your advice on because it turns out the world's kind of going crazy and you're right in the thick of it. So I'd love to know your guidance there. But before we get into any of that, what I'd really like to know is how does someone play college football and be in the Linux user group at the same time? That's what I want. That's what I wanted.
There wasn't a lot of other people doing it, to be honest. That was an interesting Wednesday nights, in the off season. So it was a lot of fun. Enjoyed college and enjoyed kind of focusing on computers, right? It was like, hey, what are you going to do when you go to college? Well, the only thing I do right now is mess around my computer. So it seems like it would be really challenging for me to go into another field. So I'm going to do this computer science thing, which turned out to be okay in the 90s.
Worked out okay for you. Worked out all right. Good. Well, before we get into, all like jokes aside, that is pretty cool though. And the behavioral analyst in me, I know there's something in there. But before we get into sort of the questions and your insights and, some of this hard hitting stuff that we're going to talk about, for those who don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So Jeremy Foster, like you said, SVP of Compute at Cisco by day, and great family, love dogs, animals, hang out at the house is what I love to do with my time, right? Watch sports. I have a lot of hobbies, crazy things like pinball, things I love to tear things apart, put them back together. So I'll probably find me in my few spare hours if I'm doing something fun, just as likely to be taking one of those things apart and adding something to it than actually playing the darn things. But yeah, 3 kids, 2 in college. One just got her license and she's doing great and having a lot of fun going back and forth when I'm traveling, right? Like that's work is a lot of travel and a lot of fun. We're in a really cool spot in the industry and the space, and I'm having a blast with the team. And it's been a really fun couple of years as we've transitioned into this role from kind of long time in sales, and now I'm running a business unit. So kind of different also, play football and then Missouri Linux Users Group, sell stuff and then build stuff. So
right.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said that, because I'm like, for some of those, viewers who maybe don't understand the difference between being a sales leader and a BU leader, help us understand what that means.
Well, no matter what kind of leader you are, it's all about people, right? And you look at the dynamics of those people, and they're very different. I learned a lot in that transition to the role, just even how to motivate people. Motivating salespeople is relatively straightforward. We know what their compensation plan is and how to align that to the goals and the things that you want with the business to accomplish. And then on the engineering side, it's a lot different, right? There's a compensation element to it, but it's also, they want to build cool stuff. They want to be part of something that is helping customers solve problems. And they want to see the other end of their work. One of the things I thought was really encouraging when I came into this role is people saying, hey, we want to talk to customers more. We want to hear more from customers, right? So just feeding them customer stories and making sure that they can see the output of their work and how that's helping solve problems for businesses has been something that's been, motivating for them, and cool to see that they're like, we all have to care about a customer at the end of the day, right? Like everything we should be doing should be to solve some problem for a customer to make their lives easier, and kind of getting everybody's buy-in on that's been good. And then helping them understand hey, what you're working on is super important, is very motivating to them. It's not just a financial thing.
Yeah. And I do want to talk about how you're motivating teams, and particularly what I find, one of my favorite things to do is talk to leaders like yourself and pick their brains on what they do really well. And you build a vision and you stick to a vision and you get people excited about a vision, probably better or not the best that I've seen. and truly were people behind your back, because I get that advantage if I get to hear what people say behind your back, where they really get excited. They're genuinely excited about the vision that you paint and, sort of how you get your teams along there. So I'd love to unpack that. Do you have a process? Do you have sort of a method that you go about, or what does that look like? Where do you start? And then how do you stick with it? Because we're all living quarter to quarter. We're all, for the most part, shareholders want to know what you're doing next quarter, and that's it. So what's the Jeremy Foster way?
Process. Yeah. I mean, I think, look, you have to have a place that you want to take the team that's going to be, again, impactful for the business, and a place that people would be excited to go. And depending on which scenario you're in, whether you're in a rebuild scenario, whether you're in a startup scenario, I think the approach has to be tailored to that. And I think one of the fun things has been throughout my career, I've had a chance to do each one of those things. And so the important things, though, from a process perspective, is you set the vision on where you want to go. You work with your team to make sure that everybody can buy into that vision, and then you roll that out to the broader organization. And that's just the first step. The next step is, how are you tracking to that? Are you reporting that out? Do you actually believe that? Is it the same thing? Meaning, like, when you get on one of my all hands calls, I don't know what the next 20 things I'm going to talk about are, but I know that you will see the slide that says this is our strategy and this is what we're executing towards. And I'd kind of drive the team nuts with it a little bit, I think, because it's like, hey, look, it looks exactly like the other 7 times you presented it. The only thing that changed was that one little 2 words here or whatever. And it's like, well, that's good, because if I got on here every time and changed this whole thing, I would be out of a job and you'd all be miserable, because we have to focus on where we want to go. And then we have to take the practical steps. And I think that's another piece, right? You put something out there, and then you have to build those practical steps to help people get there.
And like you said, I think it's so much of it is just sticking to the plan. You've made a plan, now execute. Where we're so used to, and I, again, just sort of outside looking in, because of the organizations that we get to work with, it's not just a one company does it. This is sort of an industry-wide, but whatever problem,
Right. It's not something I do, right? It's something my team does. So that whole thing around and just basic leadership, right? I want to make sure that, yeah, of course, I'm a leader. I make tough decisions. Everybody makes tough decisions, but it's about getting the right people around you and that team bought in, so they can bring that down and have that as part of what they believe and what they're bringing to the team on a daily basis too, because it's not one person. It really is all the people that you're working with to deliver that.
Right. So speaking of those people, so when you're first building out your vision, because a lot of people were going into the new year, they're figuring out their, 2025 messaging. Do you poll your teams? Do you go to strategic advisors? Do you build the vision and then let them know? What's your process there? How involved do you get your team or people that you trust around you to build that up? Or is it books, research? What do you do?
I think primarily you got to put a stake in the ground on the 3 or 4 things that you believe in, and then reach out to the people on your team and say, are we articulating? Are you on board with this? Iterate that back and forth, right? Just, okay. I think you can take things really, really broad, but sometimes you end up in the same spot. But then the point is, once you at least start to crystallize these things, then you can bring it out to everybody for that opportunity for the rest of the team to buy in, because that's what you want. You want to be able to give people the opportunity to say, hey, I had an influence on this vision. But at the same time, just like we all probably did in school, it's tough when you want to try and write a paper with 25 people at the same time. And so from effort to move quickly, I think you got to kind of start someplace with those trusted advisors, whether those external sources or internal sources, I think would depend on the situation and you're in.
Yeah, completely agree. That's exactly it. Even for instance, if we're building out a joint message with, maybe 3 large tech players, to your point, it's like writing a paper with 20 people. And our process is very much a 2-step process. We bring in the stakeholders. Everyone gets sort of a seat at the table. Everyone gets to be heard, because there's a lot of sort of buy-in and cognitive dissonance and a lot of psychology behind why people need to be heard and why they need to be heard in front of their colleagues. But then our second meeting is we come back and say, okay, here's what the message is, and here's what the strategy is, or the go-to-market or whatever. And you're integrating a lot of the feedback, but they're not dictating it. They're more contributing to it. And right. There's a lot of science behind why we do it that way. So I was so curious, and a lot of leaders are different, but I was so curious to see How do you handle that? Because to your point, you've got to get buy-in across your team. You've got to get excitement. Now, that doesn't always mean it's the same. You can get people who are excited who maybe aren't completely fully bought in, and they eventually get bought in. There's a process to that.
Yeah, there's definitely a process to that. I think that's kind of where again, the people that are around you is really important to enlist to roll that out. It just depends on how big your organization is to how you probably want to tackle that process too, right? Because if you have 1,000 people in your team, it's a little bit tough to go all the way down, right? And and there's a lot of really great points though that come from everybody within the organization. So how you manage that through the team and through the leadership to make sure you're getting all the right points from the right people that are sort of going to be able to influence whichever topic you're trying to work on is also really important. And I think that just comes back to always making sure you surround yourself with the best people who do the same thing and do the same thing. And then eventually, you're getting all the right information as you try and process through those steps.
I'm going to write a book one of these days after all these conversations, maybe after my 20,000, I don't know. But I fundamentally think that is a key contributor to the top leaders. Not the only one, but a top one, where you intentionally surround yourself with people who are equally, if not smarter or better than you in whatever topic you need them to be. I think many leaders can get quite intimidated, but the good ones get excited when they're around people who are wildly, wildly intelligent, talented, motivated. So I'm glad that you said that.
Yeah, that is always my strategy. Clearly, I'm always surrounded by people that are much more intelligent than I am, and you can't ever be intimidated by that. And in fact, the best thing, it's easy to say, like you hear about it in a book in school or you read, it always makes you look good as a leader when somebody underneath you is doing these things. I would take my leadership team in the server space versus anybody in the industry, and I'll just say that right now because they're damn good, and they're that good because we know how to work together. We understand not only what it is that we do and bring to the table, but what is not only a customer dealing with and then working backwards through a lot of different technologies, right? So, Cisco computes one piece, but compute doesn't work unless you plug it into a network, doesn't work very well unless you can take that packet outside of a data center. So there's a lot of different things there that it's not easy to build a team like that, and then to build a team that can really motivate the people that are on their teams to get through the kind of things and transitions that we've all been going through in this IT space for the last several years, which has been a rather dynamic space. And I think the thing that I love about our leadership team is just kind of how we handle transparency. And so I stole this from a leader at Cisco, Gordon Thompson. So I won't not.
Gordon, we were just together last week. Great guy. Yeah.
Yeah, he's great. And the thing that he taught me around transparency is like, you just need to make sure there's three things, right? If I can answer a question, I'm going to answer it for you. If I can't answer the question, I'm going to say I don't know. And if I know the answer to the question and I'm not unable to answer it for you right now, I'm going to say I know, but I can't communicate that to you right now. And I think that's something that we've tried to live by. And it's been cool to see how that has changed organizations that I've worked with over time.
Yeah. I have two questions for you, and I'm always watching the clock because I know we try to keep these short, but we've got to get these in because I'm dying to hear your thoughts on it. First of all, when you are trying to build a dynamic, engaged, excited team that also are myopically focused on executing well, you can get kind of, especially you're an SVP of Cisco. I mean, you have a very big title, a very big team. How do you avoid surrounding yourself with yes people who just go, "Oh my God, Jeremy, that's brilliant. That's brilliant," and never push back?
You look for the people that have pushed back around the organization, around people that have been external influences to you that will share their actual opinion, and you tell everybody on the team, I don't want you to tell me yes, right? And I think there's dynamics of that sometimes that are cultural. There's dynamics of that sometimes that are organizational, which is what you're talking about. And you have to be aware of that as a leader, and you have to tell people that, no, I don't want a yes. I want the answer. I want, like, if we're going to execute, you can't always be yes. Because as a leader, I'm going to challenge you to go places that I want you to go. And I may not know that you can't go there. And if you tell me yes, then it hurts everybody. And, people will buy into that. I think that comes back to the transparency thing. When they feel like you're being transparent with them, they're more open to being transparent with you, which sometimes would be no. And sometimes you have to understand how to communicate with the team. Like I'm a more ideas type person, and like, let's go focus on these things and then really drive them once we get there. And some ideas are bad. And so it's good when somebody tells you that idea is bad and you go, hey, I mean, I will literally mark in my head, like, that was cool. One of the best people I ever worked with, when I came over and I asked him for feedback on a presentation many years ago, he said, that was okay. I would have changed this. I would have done this. I would have done this. I would have done this. And then he kind of looked at me because I was pausing for a second, and I go, okay, well, you're going to work with me someday. And then we ended up working together for years on the team. So, yeah. I mean, that you just have to seek that out.
Yeah. I think that's exactly it. I think a lot of times we can avoid it. We're all guilty of it. I'm sure I am too. I wondered too, if the other part of it, well, first of all, you definitely have to put it out there. I want to hear no, I want pushback. I'm hiring you to think, not to check boxes. I need you to think for the organization and for our team or whatever. But I also think that there's maybe some unconscious or subconscious interpretations of how leaders react when there is pushback. If you're the kind of leader that shows up and gets upset or gets nasty or gets quiet or in any other way reacts in a negative way, I think you immediately shut your team down.
Yeah. I think you have to show, I think that's a great point. You have to demonstrate that you're willing to change your mind. Like, you presented me with data. That's not what I walked in thinking. And now you showed me this, I'll change my mind. Once the team sees you do that half a dozen times, they're like, oh, well, they actually are malleable to feedback, as opposed to, well, they're not, so why bother? And you're doing a great job in this interview, by the way, Sabrina. I wanted to
You're not, and I didn't know how to tell you, but
yes,
it's time for constructive feedback. Yes,
I know we only got 3 minutes left, but I'm doing the best that I can. So you'll have to give me feedback and then straighten it out when we do the second take.
That's right. Thank you. You're doing amazing. No teasing. That's very funny. But look at you. You just kind of went up to me, and I will completely agree with you. It's not just how you react, but if you change your mind in front of your team. I never really thought of it like that, but you're exactly right. You're exactly right. I know. And look, now I got you watching the clock. But all right, so I know we only have a few minutes left, but I do want to touch on this because we're seeing it literally everywhere. You touched on this quickly, which is why I want to make sure we talk about it. The industry is in a bit of a interesting spot. We are seeing some pretty critical layoffs, some pretty incredible innovation. We're hearing from, customers from enterprise on down, what they're looking to do, how they're looking to innovate their own businesses. Some of it is sort of pie in the sky architecture. Some of it is, can be made real and will be very soon. What's your take? Let me ask it broadly, and then I've got some more specific questions. But what's your take about what's going on in the industry and sort of what our next maybe year looks like?
Boy, in a minute, that's really tough. I think you're going to continue to see a lot of transition. I think you'll see a lot of transition, some consolidation, and you'll still see some disruption here as we go through the next couple of years on a couple different fronts. I mean, we can all read the headlines and see various people in various places. And it's very interesting to see how the AI pieces have changed the business dynamics, not let alone how it will shape our lives and change our lives, but the business dynamics in the compute space is totally different. And so I think that is probably where I want to stop if we've only got a couple minutes left.
Is there anything that you go, you know what, this is total hype, it's not going to be what we think it is? Ooh, maybe not.
Total hype. I mean, look, I think we're at this hype. I think we're in the hype cycle around AI, and I think you'll start seeing it practically change our lives 2 to 3 years from now. Like, if you look back from where we were when ChatGPT happened, ChatGPT is awesome. And like, I can ask it to write me a poem in the voice of Rocky Balboa, which makes me super happy. But it had, and there are things for the folks on my team that are writing code that can improve some of our productivity. And so there are practical things like that. And we're getting more access to the large language model type, and query-based approaches, like just with Apple doing their integration in their iPhones. That's going to dramatically change quickly how quickly you have that at your fingertips, for example. But I think you're going to see more and more with the cars and everything else that we touch, just sort of, take place over the next few years. So I think there is this big hype that's happening. It will kind of plane off a little bit. And then just like we always see with all the various hype cycles, right? Then you get to the trough and you start building your way up, which is there's a tremendous amount of growth. So it's like, no, I don't think AI is all hype, but I do think we're going to see that kind of oscillate like we've seen all the other transitions with technology.
Yeah. Yeah. I could talk to you about that alone for hours. And like I said, I think we both see sort of the turmoil or the shifts, the evolution of what's happening in the tech industry and sort of the implications that it has for businesses broader. It's an interesting time. I think you're exactly right. There's some pretty big layoffs that we're seeing, but I think with change comes opportunity. So it'll be an exciting time, and I'm inspired by your ability to keep your team motivated despite some of the things that are happening, or in addition to some of the things that are happening. So I appreciate you taking the time, especially when I know how crazy your travel schedule is. You will be literally, I think, around the world by the next time I talk to you or see you.
Probably so.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. Like all this transition, technology is one thing, but there's a lot of transition going on for people, right? So I think the most important thing there is just make sure you're taking care of yourself, getting in some type of physical activity on a daily basis to keep your mind clear, and do the things that you need to do as a leader and focus on what you need to focus on and drive your teams to focus on what they can control and what they can focus on. So it sounds super simple. And I said focus a lot of times, but I think you have to sometimes, when all this stuff's changing around you, say, hey, this is our job. This is what we're focused on. And this is what we're going to deliver. And let's go execute against that and keep people sane that way. Right. And also just make sure we're being super respectful of people's time and how they may show up to a meeting may not be how they're feeling and those types of things.
Oh, that's very true. I just had a friend of mine actually at Cisco say, you got to check on your strongest friends, but just hearing when you say things like, hey, focus on your health, go do something physical. I always like to know how leaders help kind of take care of themselves and understand and learn new things. So there you go. A little extra nugget from Jeremy. Jeremy, thank you. I could go, much longer. We never have enough time, but otherwise, people are busy.
Yeah. So, 22 minutes went fast. So thank you, Sabrina. I appreciate the opportunity.
Likewise. It's a good time, and we'll see you soon. Bye. Till next time.